Behind the Shades.
So I know we're here to talk about some amazing topics today because we're going to talk about parenting after divorce, long distance parenting, and basically whatever else that comes up. So before we dive right into that, why don't you tell my audience who you are, a little bit about yourself, and where they can find you?
Okay, well, as most of you probably gathered from the introduction, my name's AC Fisher. I like to describe myself in the most egotistical and I guess like the best possible light I can give myself to say I'm an inspirational speaker, I'm a podcaster, an activist, a philosopher, a writer, a romantic, and a producer. Um, that's my little like pre-concocted intro, anyways. Um, what I really am passionate about is platonic relationships in general. I find that like there have been thousands of books written about romantic relationships. We're all well aware of how complicated and screwed up those can be, but we spend most of our time in the non-romantic arena. And these relationships, as rewarding and as necessary as they are, they can be brutal to navigate. And I just like to get into anything that like where I can help others navigate their platonic relationships, and also where I can learn how to navigate mine from others too. I'm not an authority. I just love the conversation. It's really, really good stuff.
I will agree. I'm trying to figure it all out myself. I'm not married. I've had girlfriends and not, well, let me rephrase that. I've dated women. I don't want to make it seem like I have 10 girlfriends at one time, right? Because I can't afford that.
Right.
I just don't make enough. And I'm still trying to figure out myself, right? Especially when it's like a healthy relationship, because it seems like, at least in my situation and the people around me, is like after the first year, the honeymoon part is over, right? And we're still trying to maintain into year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on. So when you say platonic relationships, can you narrow that down and explain to our audience what do you exactly mean by that, and how can we navigate that type of relationship?
Okay, so your platonic relationships would be anything where there isn't like a romantic slash sexual component. Like your relationship with your parents, your siblings, your kids, whichever friends you have that you're not sleeping with, your boss, your coworkers, customers. I mean, just people that you see on the bus every day, perhaps. Really, I mean, that's these are the relationships that dominate the majority of our social landscape. But so few of us have any idea like what we're doing there. We just kind of like, we hope for the best. Somebody steps on our toes and then I hate you.
I think that is wise because, as you mentioned, the romantic side, you may have one at a time, right? But the
Right.
platonic relationships, you have so many. As you mentioned, you have your parents, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle. And then for those who are in the workforce, you have so many potential platonic relationships because you're interacting with different types of people. Is there like a struggle to understand maybe the types of boundaries that people should set when it comes to these types of relationships, and understanding how to keep people close enough but not too close?
I think boundaries are a struggle in most relationships, but I think they're especially challenging when you're dealing with your platonic relationships because, like I mentioned before, the romantic relationships, we think about them a lot. We discuss them a lot. There's tons and tons of resources available to tell you what reasonable boundaries are and aren't. But when you're dealing with your circle of friends, I mean, even an antisocial person is going to have a couple of friends. A very social person may have dozens. Each one of these relationships is going to come with its own set of demands. And as people, unfortunately, like we're not typically in the habit of agreeing upon or discussing or negotiating boundaries right up front. We tend to want to assume what is and isn't okay based on our personal preferences. that whole golden rule thing, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But the problem is the golden rule doesn't really work so well. We should be trying to do unto others as they would have us do unto them. And we can't know what that is without having like a dedicated conversation or series of conversations about it. And unfortunately, these conversations, they just don't seem to come up until a huge conflict has arisen.
I was telling someone the other day that as children, we are taught how to speak, but as adults, we're not taught how to communicate. And that highlights a point that you're saying where the only time we want to have a conversation with someone is when it hits the fan. For example, AC, I lent you my car and you crashed it. Then we're having this big conversation. Oh my God, how can you do that? But we should have had a conversation beforehand. Were there situations for yourself, maybe where you, looking back, should have had those types of conversations to make sure that things went a lot smoother in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Like I had a rather heated exchange with a close friend of mine a couple of years ago. He thought that he was being very supportive of me in my I'll say like relationship challenges with my ex-wife. Now, what I had needed from him was just a sympathetic ear, somebody to say, look, I'm feeling frustrated. These are the reasons why. I didn't tell him that up front. I just assumed that he would know. So when he started feeding back and saying, you know what, well, she's actually not a very nice person. The reality is I've never liked her. You don't deserve to put up with this crap. I was really, really offended by these things. I'm thinking, look, I'm not trying to drag this woman. She's the mother of my child. I care for her a great deal. I am frustrated, but how dare you insult her? But I mean, like he, by any reasonable standards, was just being a good friend by his estimation. That I needed something a little different or unusual in the situation. I mean, ultimately, I couldn't put the entirety of the blame on him. I could have and should have said right up front, look, this is what I need from you right now.
I think as men, we've all been there because you go to your friend and sometimes you'll be brutally honest and you don't realize that they don't actually like the person that you're dating or that you're married to. And they put on a good front and they'll be respectful enough, which is good too, right? That's a mark of a good friend where you can bring someone around. They're like, well, I don't really know about this person, but they will still be the best man at your wedding. They'll still be very supportive. There'll still be things like that. And I wonder sometimes, did you feel that you're opening like Pandora's box when you went to this friend and he said these things and you're like, my God, is this how you really feel about the person I married and have a child with?
Yeah, there were definitely like those times, especially like in retrospect, man, it like explains so many things about why, like if I would go to him to have a certain conversation, instead of getting like a clearly defined response, he would just sort of bite his lip and then take a deep breath. But what you were mentioning about how like your friends show you respect. I mean, it just sort of like sparked the thought in my mind. It's like, man, you really don't know what friends and family think about your romantic interests until after you break up. Like they'll give you little hints up front. They'll try to look for the upside, like, oh, she seems nice. She's got a nice car. They don't tell you like, I hate her freaking attitude. She's opinionated, and I just want to erase her face. Until 10 years later, divorce, children, real estate being split up. Now, hey, well, we've hated her the whole time. Well, thanks for the info. You could have told me up front, spared me a lot of hassle.
It's like she becomes this monster of a woman, right? And everyone is like, I saw that coming.
Well, I mean, even like for us as guys trying to support our friends, because I'm sure that like for every story that you or I can tell of this nature, our friends can probably tell something similar where we were the ones being like, yeah, I didn't like her. Maybe we should just think that there's nothing wrong with like being straight with your friends and saying, look, like, I'm not saying this to be hurtful. I'm saying this because I care about you because you're my brother or whatever. But like, I don't really see this as a good fit. This chick looks like trouble. And even after the breakup, the guy's probably hurting enough. He's probably upset enough. that's not the best time to take a negative inventory. Maybe just be respectful of the fact that this was his choice. This was his time. There is a sense of loss there. No matter how angry he is, he's probably only angry because it hurts. A soft word, just something I think women are really good at for the most part. Is just like even a kind touch. I mean, we'll sort of like punch each other in the arm. Hey, you're fine. We'll get you laid this weekend. But just a hand on the shoulder. You know what, buddy? If you need to talk, I'm here. Even if you got to pull the guy aside so you don't look like, you're not ruining your macho image, right? There's a way to do it.
I agree. I think women are a lot better at that because they will say up front, this guy's a jerk. Right? And if their friend decides to continue forward, then that's fine. But at least in my experiences, if you don't get along with the friends, they will make it known that they don't like you. Right. And I remember a time where I'm not friends with them now, probably why, but there was two of my male friends. And I had that type of conversation with them where I said, hey, they're dating this person. And I just mentioned to them, I was like, this person that you're dating, just so you know, they've been with this many people who are not maybe in our circle, but in the circle outside of our circle. So still close enough, right? And they continue forward. And oddly enough, one of them, when she ended it and started talking to someone else, then he became mad at everybody. Despite the warnings, despite people saying that, hey, maybe you want to look out, I believe that they were respectful, but I guess he felt a certain type of way and he held that in the entire time that they were dating. And at no point did I get the impression that they were exclusive, but maybe they were. And then when that situation ended, he began to lash out at the people around him. And I'm guessing if you were to hear that story, or if one of your friends were to go through that, what's maybe the type of conversation that you'd want to have with them to say, hey, it's going to be okay, but you still have to have that type of conversation?
I've learned in recent years to take a much softer approach than maybe I have been naturally inclined towards, like when I was younger. Like I just turned 50 earlier this year. The last couple of years, I've really started looking at the world very differently. There's something about like realizing there's less days ahead than there are behind that makes you think, okay, maybe there's no time for all this nonsense. And part of the nonsense is these types of situations where, I've got something to say and I'm not really sure what the best words are to use. I used to just be like, you know what? Boom, here's like the hardest version of the truth in the least amount of words possible, and you can just sweep up your own pieces when I'm done. But now I don't know, when I got a friend who's going through a rough time, I'm not hesitant to say, you know what, like, do you need a hug? Do you need a sympathetic ear? Like, do you need somebody to be angry with? Like, just tell me what you need. And like, if I'm at all capable, like, you're not going through this alone. Anything you need in the moment, day or night, please know that you can just reach out and I will be there with you or for you, whatever. If something comes up that you can't handle, I'll even be there instead of you. But I am here. Just tell me what you need.
That was something that I wish was available to my friend at that time. Not that I wasn't able to do it. I just felt that it wasn't appropriate coming from me, because what you're saying is very wise. And I think more men need to express that with each other, because we don't have necessarily the same resources that women do in comparison. We're not as encouraged maybe to express our emotions and to offer an emotional assistance to a friend, because as you mentioned, AC, right, it could be as simple as, hey, I understand that you're hurting. It was a bad breakup. You really cared about this person. What can I do to help you get through this? Is it a hug? Is it someone to talk to? Is it someone to cry on? Things of that nature. Have you experienced a situation where you're trying to wonder why men are maybe not as accepting or not maybe as forthcoming in asking for help or expressing that they need help from their fellow men.
I really like to think that that is a trend that is changing with the younger people. Like, I don't know how old you are, but I mean, I grew up kind of in a time where we were just taught, boys don't cry. You don't express your feelings. If there's something going on, just shove it deep down inside. Like, literally anything that had to do with the emotional was like seriously frowned upon. And our dads, were emotionally stunted people that were also raised by emotionally stunted people. It was like this age old cycle of just suck it up. And and if you were at all emotional, then they would start with the homophobic slurs implying that there's something wrong with you. um I do see a lot with the younger people, like especially like I would say like early 20s teenagers now. Like I've got kids in both of those age brackets. They don't approach the world in the same way that I was taught to. But then again, I've taught them a little differently too. I've forced myself to um, move beyond the things I was taught, and maybe it was easier for me because a lot of the things I was taught were just like obviously wrong. Like, I know that it's not okay to like beat on my kids, so like I was beaten on, but I'm not going to hit them. Right there, there's an abuse cycle that's broken. I'm not going to shame them for having real feelings. um I do think though that there's still, like, as much as things are changing, there's a lot of guys that are stuck in the in between, right? It's like, well, I don't know if it's the right thing. Like, when you were talking about not knowing if it was appropriate coming from you to support your friend in a certain way, I mean, I might be misreading you, but I sort of sensed like a hesitance there. Like, I don't want this to come off wrong. I don't want to look weird. I don't want you to get the wrong idea, maybe. When really the only idea is that, like, you love your friend and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think like we all need to just, as much as it might even feel awkward or scary, just think, okay, like when I was in a similar situation, because chances are we all have been, what did I really, really wish would happen? What kind of people was I seeking out for the support? Like, I think we've all again been in that situation where we're with a friend. We would desperately just like to say, look, man, can you just tell me everything's going to be okay? Can you put your hand on my hand and tell me that, like, tell me how brave I'm being? Tell me that you understand that it hurts. And we'll sit there crying out, wishing somebody would read our minds, but we don't open our mouths. And if we know that our friends are probably sitting there hoping that we'll read their minds, I mean, like, we don't have to be mind readers. We just need to like think of ourselves. Like, how did we handle this? What did we need? What did we not get? And let's give those things. And that in turn, I think, gives permission to everybody else to give the same in their other relationships. It's like, it's a beautiful, contagious thing.
Helping people is so well needed. And you're absolutely right when you mentioned that maybe there was some hesitation on my part to assist this friend. It was at the time I knew what I would want in that situation, but I didn't know if that's what he needed in that situation. So I was trying to separate myself from it. And what I should have done looking back, I should have just asked.
Fair
And
enough.
said, hey, what is it that you need? Because he wasn't forthcoming in the situation, and he wasn't going to be because, as you mentioned, right? I'm macho. I'm strong. I'm a man. I can't show weakness, but he was hurting. And as I got older, similar to you, I'm in my 30s now, I began to realize that many of my friends are speaking to coaches and counselors and mentors and therapists because navigating this world is difficult and they're facing some challenges. And it kind of made me sad that I wasn't aware of what they're going through. And in some cases, to a degree, I was actually playing a part in it. I'll give you an example. Some of the success that I had during the lockdown, some people didn't have that success. So when they began to see that, they began to compare. And I think a lot of men do that. They compare themselves to their circle of friends and they begin to rank themselves and they find that they're wanting. Have you experienced anything like that where maybe you began to become aware of the comparison from other people around you? And if so, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, I've definitely, I've been envied. I've been envious at different times. What I've gotten though from years and years and years and years of therapy is that there's nothing wrong with having that competitive nature so long as it manifests in a healthy way. Like if I look at you and I think, wow, I really like those headphones that you're wearing. I don't know if I can afford them. You know, that little pang of jealousy might be what it takes to drive me to work a little bit harder. You know, maybe I'll skip my Starbucks for a couple of days, put a few extra dollars in my pocket, and then maybe by the end of the week, you know, I've got the little bit of difference I needed to buy those headphones. You know, in that sense, it's okay for me to compare what you've got to what I've got. But in other ways, I mean, like if I'm sitting there thinking, man, those are nice, I can't afford them. I'll never be able to afford them. I've got too many obligations. My life is freaking terrible. You know, that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for you. Like as friends, you know that I'm sitting there every time we're sitting across from each other. You got your headphones on, and you almost feel guilty for enjoying something that you bought for yourself. It puts a strain on the relationship, and like I'm hating you for something. Why should I hate you for being successful? I should just be happy for you, right? But what I got from therapy was, you know, the competition that we need to focus on is not the competition that we perceive that we're having with the people around us. The competition we're really in, the only one that matters is the one from yesterday's version of us. Am I a better man today than I was yesterday? Do I know more? Have I influenced more people in a positive way? Have I learned to love more effectively? And yeah, maybe it is a case of like, do I have an extra $10 in the bank? I don't think it's good to like measure ourselves in terms of monetary stuff either. I mean, the older I get, the more I realize that, you know, what's really, really valuable in life is our relationships, like coming back to that. And when we get too competitive, it's like the stuff we have or don't have, it poisons those relationships. We put these things in between ourselves and like it, I don't know. I don't choose to live that way anymore.
It definitely is. It puts like a wedge between two people when you focus on the material aspect of life. And I think that is just a sign of true wisdom and maturity. As you get older, you realize you look around, it's nice to have a car. Very nice in a lot of cases, right? It's nice to have a house. It's nice to be able to have money to go on vacation or go to a nice dinner or bring a date with you, things of that nature. But then when you sit back and you think about it, you realize it's not everything that it's cut out to be. It's just one of those things that it's a nice to have. It allows me certain types of freedoms, but it doesn't define who I am. And AC, if I were to ask you, looking back on what you have gone through over the last, let's say, a couple of years or the last number of years, are you where you expected to be in your life?
No, not at all. And if you had talked to me, say 5 years ago and told me that this is exactly where I was going to be right now, I can't say I would have been happy about the news. I would have been miserable. I would have been terrified. I would have done everything in my power to change the trajectory of my life. And I would have created a situation where I missed out on the most amazing stuff because I love where I am right now. And whereas I think there's a danger for us like to just learn to settle for whatever situation we find ourselves in. The flip side to that is, I mean, if we learn to appreciate the good stuff and the good people in whichever situation we find ourselves in, I think life becomes a lot more fulfilling. You know, like I don't ever want to be satisfied. I always want to feel driven to keep on going. But I always want to be content at the same time. You know, like I didn't expect that my wife and I were going to go our separate ways, that we were going to admit to each other that the relationship wasn't working and hadn't been working for a long time. I didn't want to fall out of love with this woman who I was like crazy about, who I'd spent so many years with, who I'd had a wonderful child with. I didn't want my dog to die. You know, I didn't want to be forced to move. I didn't want to think I had fallen in love with another woman only to have my heart broken. You know, but it's been a surprising and terrifying and satisfying and beautiful ride to get here where I am right now. And again, maybe this is one of the things I've taken out of like the many years of therapy, is that when we learn to like ourselves, we learn to be okay with the paths that we've taken to get where we are. You realize that, like, look, if I changed one of these painful situations, I don't end up here. I end up somewhere else. I end up someone else. And I don't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to be anyone else. I love who I am, and I love where I am. And I love who I'm with. Most importantly, I love who I'm with. Both my son, you know, who, like, his mom lives in another country on an opposite coast, with my wife, who, you know, I just thought we were friends when we first met. But these surprising turns that life has taken, man, what great stuff. And I guess the reason I lay on the detail and the appreciation of this like so hard is because most of us do have an idea where we think our lives should be going, where we should be right now, even. And if you get into that attitude never changes. It doesn't matter what you achieve. You're always going to wonder why you didn't achieve more, why you didn't achieve something different. It doesn't matter who you end up with. Oh, how would a life have been if I'd married my high school sweetheart instead? You know, we question things, we scrutinize them, we dissect them to the point where there's nothing beautiful left. You know, like, you got to start looking at your life a little bit more like, okay, you're appreciating like a piece of art. You're not seeing blobs of paint on a canvas. You're seeing a picture. You're enjoying an emotional experience. You're maybe seeing something that's worth interpreting, but it's an immersive thing that you're enjoying, which you can't get when you're just picking apart the surface details.
I told someone the other day that based on my childhood, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But more importantly, I wouldn't change it because it has created the person who I am today.
Oh God, I feel that so hard.
Right. And when you mentioned
childhood
that
wasn't easy for you then?
No, I grew up without my mother and my father, and I was raised by my grandmother, but I'm blessed because someone was there for me. I could have ended up in the system, right? An adoption. Many kids don't fare the best type of life in that system. And I look back and I say that I would not want anyone to go through that. But if I were to take away that experience is going to change who I am, I will not change my childhood because I love who I am. To your point, it is a part of you and it put you on this trajectory to say, hey, I can become a better man. And maybe you've done this, AC. When you look back and you're kind of surprised of where you are, but you're happy that you're there. Have you been able to maybe look forward and say, this is where I am today, but there's still more that I want to do. And where is that destination for you in the future?
You know what the strange thing is? If you'd asked me this very question, like even a year ago, I would have had such a clearly defined answer of, you know, how I'm communicating with my future self, what the path ahead looks like. But I don't know. I've been going through some changes the last few months, and I feel like the only honest answer right now is it's not that I don't care where life is going. It just I've learned that there's no point sweating the details because I can't control it. I don't even know, like, how to anticipate it a lot of the times, like the anticipation factor. That's something I think about a lot because I got like really, really extreme anxiety. And the way I cope with my anxiety is I try to imagine like every possible outcome so that nothing can really surprise me. I've already like, if something comes up, it's like, oh yeah, well, I thought that might happen. But when it comes to the future, I can't do that. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, could get diagnosed with a terminal disease. My son could get hit by a bus, like my wife could gain weight. I just don't know. And more importantly, like, I don't want to know. I don't, if you were to tell me, look, like, I can give you some bullet points. Like, I'm not going to paint the whole picture for you, but I'm going to give you like a general outline of where your next 5 years are going. Are you interested in seeing this, AC? I'd be like, you know what? No, set fire to it. I don't care. I don't want to know. It takes all the magic away. And as silly as it sounds, it's like I kind of got caught up in like that childlike magic of living my life. I don't know if you can identify with that or not.
I can, because for me, in my 20s, I would say that by 30, 40, 50, I wanted to be this, do this, be this, and do this. Now that I've reached here, I'm thinking, as long as I have my peace and my happiness, I'm okay where life takes me. I'm less focused on the end of the journey and more aware of the actual traveling of the journey. I want to look to my life and left and be like, oh, that's nice scenery over there. I want to look to my right and the same thing, instead of me ignoring what's around me and just saying that light at the end of the tunnel, I need to know exactly what that is. I'm a different man now.
Well, you sound very self-assured, right? And I think like when you're self-assured, the confidence that comes along with that, I think you're more likely just to look ahead and think, you know what, whatever comes up, I got this. Past experience has taught me that life isn't going to kill me. Like, don't know what's coming. I'm going to enjoy what I can see, and I'm not going to stress about what I can't see because I'm enough of a man to walk through it, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of, I don't want to say I feel like invincible, right? Like
no, I
I'm
mean, like, I
Superman.
don't, like, you don't strike me as that kind of like delusional or cocky, but
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with thinking, you know what, within reason, I can handle what's coming.
Yeah. You hit it. You accurately said it. That's where I am in my life. I'm like, I could handle what life throws at me because growing up, it wasn't easy, but I made it work. And here I am to continue to make it work. So as we close, what advice would you like to give the next generation of young men who are coming up and trying to figure it out, but maybe they need some guidance?
um I think about a quote from my hero Keith Richards. He said, I've lived life in my own way, and I'm here because I've taken the time to figure out who I am. And I think the figuring out who you are component, that's the most important thing, because when you're sure of who you are, you're sure of the substance of your being, you're less likely to be swayed by either the opinions of others or what you perceive to be the opinions of others. You can just approach life on your own terms and say, like, you know what? I'm not worried about you judging me harshly. I know the truth. I'm not worried about who's right. I'm worried about what's right. I could disagree with you, but then we both be wrong. It's not like you turn into a jerk, but I would really, really hope that the younger people would just seriously take the time to like explore themselves. It's so easy to like criticize others, but when you turn that critical eye inward, that's where the good stuff is, man. The other thing that everybody should get really comfortable with, and this will help you navigate every relationship you're ever going to have: offense is taken, it's not given. Somebody says something and your feelings are hurt, or you get angry, or you want to react. Don't think, why are you doing this? Why are you saying this? You think, why am I reacting this way? Personalize it, because it is inside you. And the last thing that I would like strongly, strongly encourage everybody is to get comfortable with the idea that it's a more valuable exercise to take responsibility than it is to assign blame. We've all got our role in things. Even if you and I get in an argument, it might be 99% your fault. I still had a part in it. I still need to own my piece. I can't sit there taking your inventory. That's yours. And I think, if we do these things, I mean, it's not going to solve all of your problems, but it's going to put you on the right path to figure out how to fill in the gaps for yourself.